Brightly everyone. Today, we will be discussing about the global populations and mobility, the global demography and global migrations. So since in 80s, the global population increased the size by multiple folds. So by the beginning of the 21st century world, the population reached 6 billion. So this learning module will look into determinants and consequences of an overwhelmingly massive numbers of people living in globe and human population trends. Additionally, this module will also discuss the phenomenon of global migrations and its impacts on the various sectors such as economic, social, security, cultural, and others to daily lives of people. But first, let us discuss the demography. The demography it is a scientific study of the determinants and consequences of human population trends. So this means it is the scientific study of a human populations, like how many people there are, where they live, and why the numbers change. So for example, counting how many people live in the Philippines and studying how many young are young and old. So next is the demographic transition. Demographic transition, it refers to the transition from high birth and death rates to low birth and death rates as a country develops from a pre-industrial to industrialized economic system. So it means it is the changes of a country from having many births and deaths to having few births and deaths as it becomes more developed. So for example, the country of Japan. So the Japan now has a low birth and death rates because it is a highly developed country. Next, it is the migration. Migration is the crossing of the boundary of a political or administrative unit for a certain minimum period of time. It includes the movement of refugees, displaced persons, uprooted people, as well as the economic migrants. Um, it is the movement of a people from one place to another to live for a certain time. It's either within a country or to another country. For example, a family moving from Philippines to Canada to find a better job opportunities. So the next is migrants. Migrants, these are any person who is moving or has moved across as an international border within a state away from his or her habitual place of residence, regardless of first, the person's legal status, second, whether the movement or the voluntary or involuntary, third, what the causes of the for the movement are, and lastly, what is the length of the a migrant is a person who moves from their usual home or habitual place from another place. It's either inside the country or the other country for any reason and for any length of time. So for example, an overseas Filipino worker like sa mga OFW, they are working like sa Saudi Arabia, commonly nga gayus ang work sila sa Kuwait and somewhere nga layo sa ilang pamilya to find or to seek a better job opportunities. So next is the demography. A massive increase of billion people occurred in no less than 200 years ago. So this is the global demographic transitions brought by momentous changes, reshaping the economic and demographic life cycles of individuals and restructuring populations. Clearly, before the transitions, the growth of the world population is close to stationary, depicting that life is short. Births were many, growth is slow, and the population is young. Since 18th, the global population size has already increased by a factor of 6 and by 2100 will have risen by a factor of 10. So there will be 50 times as many elderlies but only 5 times as many children. Thus, the ratio of elders to children will have risen by a factor of 10. So the length of life, which has already more than doubled, will have tripled, while births per woman will have dropped from 6 to 2. So around 200 years ago, the world's populations stated growing very fast because of the people began living longer and having fewer children. Before this, people died sila young, and the populations grow slowly by 2100. So there will be many more elderly people and fewer children. For examples, in the 80s and 18s. So the world populations was around 1 billion. So in today's like karon nga generations, it's over 8 billion people na siya nga live sa diri sa kalibutan because of the longer and have a fewer children. So next is the Malthusian theory. According to Thomas Mattel, meaning Malthus, in 1760s to 1834, so was the first person to draw widespread attention to the two components of the natural increase, births and deaths, like fertility and mortality. Malthus formulated an essay titled Essay on the Principle of Populations, initially published in 1789, wherein the postulated that populations tended to grow geometrically while the means of subsistence grow only arithmetically. So according to Thomas Malthus, also agreed that the difference between geometric and arithmetic growth created a tension between the theme of the growth of the populations and of that means of subsistence. This gap could not persist indefinitely. Also, in the said essay, it was mentioned and populations was held in equilibrium with the steady growing economy with the slowly growing economy, faster population growth and with depressed wages, that causing mortality to rise due to the famine away or disease. In short, misery. So depressed wages would also cause a postponement of marriage, resulting in prostitution and other vices, including contraception. Like this he called preventive check. So since the populations could potentially grow more rapidly than the economy, it will always held in a check by misery and vices, which were therefore the inevitable human lot. So the economic progress could help only temporarily because the population could soon grow to its new equilibrium level. So here in to Thomas Malthus, he explains that the population grows faster than the food supply. When this happens, the problems like hunger and poverty occur because he believed that the people could control population growth only through moral restraint like delaying marriage. However, his idea did not come through because the Industrial Revolution increased food and resources. So, for example, if the food supply grows slowly, but people keep moving many children, so there may not be enough food for everyone that might cause leading to hunger. Mm. So lastly, the demographic transition. First, during the first half of the 29th century, demographers conceived the notion of demographic transitions. So the demographic transitions framework illustrates the population's growth in terms of discrepancies and changes into two crude vital rates, like the mortality and fertility. Strip off the essentials like the demographic transition refers to the transitions from high birth and death rates to low birth and death rates as a country develops from pre-industrial to unindustrialized economic systems. So it explains how many countries move from having high birth and death rates to low birth and death rates as they develop and improve living conditions. So, like for example, in the past, many developed countries like India and other countries have a high birth and death rates, but now both are decreasing as living conditions improve. So the next reporter will be Mr. Mariposa to dig in more about this topic.
Good day, everyone. Today, we're going to explore how population change over time as societies develop. As of 2025, it's around 117 million people live here in the Philippines. So by the end of this lesson, you'll understand why that number has grown so much and where it might go next. Let's start with stage number 1. Pre-industrial society. This is how most of the world lived before factories, modern medicines, or widespread education. Pre-industrial societies rely almost entirely on subsistence agriculture, farming just enough to survive. There's little surplus, so technology and social structures change very slowly, which directly impacts population trends. You'll see people working the land, large families, and simple tools. This is the reality of pre-industrial life. Everyone depends on farming, and there's no way to store food for long periods of treat serious illness. Now let's list the core characteristic of stage 1. These are the patterns that define how population behaves in pre-industrial societies. Character. The first characteristics is high birth rates and high death rates. And both go up and down depending on things like floods, plagues, or droughts. For example, in 14th century Europe, in Black Death killed 30 to 60% of the population in just a few years. And that's a huge sudden spike in death rates. At the same time, women had 5 to 6 children on average, but most didn't live to adulthood. Second characteristics is slow and unstable population growth. Because birth rates and death rates are almost equal, most children die young. The total population doesn't increase much over time. For example, from 1000 to 1700 CE, Europe's population only grew from 14 million to 80 million. That's 700 years to double. And during the Black Death, it dropped by half in just a decade. So in characteristic number 3 is the low life expectancy. So life expectancy is the average age a person is expected to live to at birth. In pre-industrial societies, it's usually 30 to 4 years, not because people never live to be old, but because so many children die before age. For example, in remote Amazonian tribe today, life expectancy is around 35 years. Most adults who survive childhood live to be 60 or 70, but half the kids die before age 10. Families dealing with illness or loss. In pre-industrial societies, there is no access to antibiotics, vaccines, or hospitals, so even a simple fever can be deadly for a child. So let's go on for a reason for high birth rates. Children are a form of labor. In subsistence farming, you need hands to plant, harvest, and take care of animals. There are no machines, so more kids mean more help to put food on the table. For example, in a traditional Filipino rice farming community, that's still mostly pre-industrial. A family with 5 kids can plant twice as much rice as family with 1 or 2. So the second reason is the high child mortality. Families know many of their kids will die young, so they have more to make sure at least some survive to take care of them when they're old. For example, in an isolated community in rural Africa, a woman might have 7 children, expecting only 3 to live to adulthood. So the third reason is no access to family planning. There are no birth control like pills, condoms, or clinics to help couple choose how many kids to have. Plus, many religions and cultures encourage large families as a sign of blessings or status. For example, in many pre-industrial Christian communities in the Middle Ages, having many children was seen was obeying the Bible's command to be fruitful and multiply. Now, let's talk about why death rates are so high in stage 1. There are some factors that cause child mortality and low expectancy. Page Reasons for disease, famine, poor medical knowledge. So let's cover this together. So in disease, without vaccines or antibiotics, diseases like cholera, measles, and malaria spread quickly, especially in areas with dirty water. For example, a cholera outbreak in the pre-industrial village can kill half the population in a week. So number 2 is famine. Without modern farming tools or food storage, drought or floods can destroy entire harvest. In 18th century India, a famine killed 10 million people. That's more than the current population of Metro Manila. So number 3 is poor medical knowledge. Doctors didn't understand how diseases spread. Examples that dirty hands cause infections. So treatments often made people worse. For example, in the Middle Ages, doctors used bleeding to treat fevers, which often killed patients. Let's talk at a modern example. The remote Amazonian tribes. These communities still live of hunting, gathering, and small-scale farming. No factories, no hospitals, no roads. Birth rates are high. Women have 5 to 6 children. Death rates are high. Half the kids die before age 5. And population growth is almost zero. Another example is isolated mountain communities in Nepal. They have the same patterns. So let's proceed to the second stage, the early industrial society. It's a period when a society starts industrializing, and this brings big changes to population dynamics. The most important thing to remember here is that birth rates stay high, but death rates drop sharply, leading to rapid population growth. Now let's look at the main traits, the 2 key characteristics. First one is the birth rates remain at the high levels of stage, and death rates fall significantly. As a result, population grows very quickly. This is often called a population explosion. So the question is, why do birth rates stay high? The same factors from pre-industrial times still apply. So in children, children are still needed for farming work, and many children die young from illness, so families have more to ensure some survive. There's no widespread family planning, and religion and society encourage having more children. So let's go on for the reasons for falling death rates. And here's where the big change happens. Death rates drop because of industrial progress. The first one is improvements in medical care mean more people can be treated for illness. Second one is the better water supply and sanitations reduce the spread of diseases like cholera or typhoid. With these changes, far fewer children die in infancy and early childhood. And the example for this is a classical historical example is England during Industrial Revolution in 18th and 19th centuries. As factories grew, cities developed and public health measures were introduced. Death rates fell fast while birth rates stay high, leading to huge jump in England's population. So to sum up, stage 2, is marked by high birth rates, falling death rates, and rapid population growth, all driven by the start of industrialization and better living conditions, and that's the essence of the early industrial stage. To the stage 3 of the Le industrial society. So this is the phase where industrialization matures and we see another case shift in how population change. As its heart, stage 3 is defined by this birth rates began to fall while death rates stay low, so population growth continues but at slower pace. Here are the main traits. Birth rate starts declining noticeably from the high levels of stage 1 and 2. Second one is death rates remain low and stable. Third one is population still grows, but the explosion from stage 2 slows down significantly. So there are the reason for falling birth rates. So the question is, why do birth rates drop now? Industrialization brings new changes to family life. The first one is improved medical care and better diets mean more children survive into adulthood. So families don't need to have as meaning. As societies become more industrial, fewer children are needed for farming or manual labor. In fact, educating children becomes more expensive. The reason for stable low death rates. Death rates stay low for the same progress that started in stage number 2, now fully established. The continued improvements in medical care, reliable clean water supply and sanitation systems, and infant and child mortality remains low and overall health improves. And the example for this is a historical example, includes many countries in Latin America and Asia in the late 20th century. Places like Brazil, Mexico, or South Korea, where industrial growth leads to falling birth rates and slower population growth. So, to wrap up, stage number 3 is all about maturing industrialization, driving down birth rates while low death rates persist, resulting in slower but still steady population growth. That's the late industrial society stage in a nutshell. Now, let's explore the final phase. We're covering stage 4 of the demographic transition model, the post-industrial society. This is where societies have fully shifted to modern service-based economies and population dynamics reach a new balance. The core of stage 4 is this: both birth rates and death rates are low, leading to stable or every slow population growth and sometimes even a decline. So here are the main traits. Birth rates are at or below replacement level, the rate needed to keep the population steady. Death rates remain low and stable, population growth is minimal, stable, or may start to shrink. Life expectancy is very high compared to earlier stages. And the reason for low birth rates uh, stay low due to deep changes in social and economic life. And the widespread access to family planning and contraception. Good health means people feel confident their children will survive. People marry later in life, and many choose to have fewer children or none at all, often prioritizing careers, education, or personal goals. So the reasons for stable low death rates. Death rates stay low because of long-standing uh, advancements that continue to improve a top-tier medical care, including treatments for chronic diseases like heart diseases and cancer. A reliable, nutritious food supply that supports overall health, people live much longer. Life expectancy often exceeds 80 years in these societies. And the example are include countries in Western Europe, like Germany and Italy and Japan. Places with highly developed services economies where low birth rates and high life expectancy have lead to stable or slightly declining populations. So, to summarize, stage 4 is marked by low birth and death rates, stable or slow populations, growth and high life expectancy, and all tied to a fully developed post-industrial economy and modern social norms. That's what define the industrial society stage. So now for the big questions. Can developing countries like the Philippines follow the same path as industrial countries to lower population growth? So the DTM suggests yes, but it's not that simple. Industrial countries had centuries to develop, but developing countries are under pressure to grow fast and reduce population growth at the same time. For example, Thailand emulated industrial countries by investing in healthcare and family planning, and its birth rate fell from 6 to 1.5 per woman in just 30 days. Thank you.
Now, let's proceed to the criticisms of the demographic transition theory and the fertility transition theory. First, let's discuss about the criticisms of the demographic transition theory. So the demographic transition theory is only based on Western societies like Europe, America, Japan. So it is not inevitable that there will be a fall in fertility rates in less developed countries. So the length of the time that the countries will traverse the stages, if they do, is unpredictable. So times have changed since the developed world went through demographic transitions. So this theory was created using information from rich Western countries like Europe, America, and Japan. So because of this, it may not match the experience of least developed countries. And also, not all developing countries will automatically have fewer children over time. So some may stay longer in the stages and some may not move forward at all. We also cannot predict how long each stage will last because every country is different. And today's world is also very different from the past. Technology, culture, and society have changed. So countries that develop the same way as countries did. For example, the Philippines may experience fast improvements in technology, but birth rates may still remain high because of religion, transition, and family expectation. So the main idea is that the demographic transition theory is not one size fits all. It works for Western countries, but it may not perfectly explain population changes in developing countries today. Especially culture, religion, and modern conditions are very different. Next, the fertility transition theory. So this theory states that fertility is declining in the less developed countries at a rate which exceeds the rate of decline that was experienced in developed countries. It seems to be related directly to the extent to which modern contraceptives are employed. In modern times, information about contraceptives is widespread due to mass media. So this theory says that many less developed countries today are lowering their birth rates faster than rich countries did in the past. So a major reason is the use of modern contraceptives. So information about birth control is now easy to access through TV, radio, internet, and social media. So people can learn quickly and make choices. For example, a family in a small town learns from a health center and Facebook's videos about family planning. So they decide to have only 2 children. Next, so strip off of the major points. So the fertility transition theory asserts that while economic development can create a climate conducive to reduction in fertility, it is a change in cultural attitude about large families and a willingness to use contraception that matters aside from the presence and availability of contraception itself. So, even if a country becomes richer, birth rates won't drop unless people change how they think about family size. If Filipinos see small families as better, are willing to use contraceptions, then fertility will decline. So culture and personal decisions matter just as much as money. For example, a couple with good jobs might still want many children if their culture values big families. Still, opposition to birth control and family planning are plenty. So the manufacture, distribution, and education about use of contraceptives remain expensive. So the religion can block birth control programs. So others are of societal concerns like low status of women, lack of political and economic rights, and lack of access to education. So many people still disagree with using birth control. So some religions do not accept contraceptives. So contraceptives are also expensive to produce, distribute, and teach. So social issues like women having no rights or education are also keeping birth rates high. But for example, a young woman who cannot finish school may marry early and have many children because she has limited choices in life. So overall, the main idea is that the fertility is dropping in many developing countries, but this change is shaped by access to modern contraceptives, education, culture, and personal beliefs. So economic progress helps, but real change happens when people accept smaller families and have the freedom to make reproductive choices. So that's all.
Bright morning once again. I am Mary Garcia, and this morning we will discuss the global migration. Global migration is a complex phenomenon that tackles on a multiplicity of economic, social, security, and several aspects affecting our daily lives in a rapidly interconnecting world. On the other hand, migration encompasses a large variety of movements and situations involving people. So global migration means people moving from one country to another for different reasons, finding work, safety, or joining family. It is a big and complex because it affects many parts of our lives such as the economy, society, security, and culture. It also links economies and cultures worldwide. So migration is embroiled with geopolitics, trade, and cultural exchange and provides opportunities for several countries, business, communities, and cultures to benefit in a grand manner. In 2017, the number of migrants reached 258 million compared to about 173 million in 2000. However, the proportion of international migrants in the world population is only slightly higher than that recorded over the past decades, equaling 3.4% in 2017 compared to 2.8% in 2000 and 2.3% in 1980. Today, more people live in countries different from where they were born than ever before. In 2017, there were about 258 million migrants worldwide, compared around 173 million in 2000. Even though the total number grew, migrants only made up a small part of the world's population. 3.4% in 2017, which is slightly higher than 2.8% in 2000 and 2.3% in 1980. This means that the share of migrants has increased slowly as the global population grows. Since the earliest time, people have been moving from one place to another for many reasons. Some moved to find work or better economic opportunities, to join their family, or to study. This type of moves usually happen in good circumstances because people want to improve their lives. However, not all migrations happens in good conditions. Some people are forced to move because they want to escape, like war, violence, persecution, or threats to their human rights. So these people have no choice but to leave their homes to be safe. Besides conflicts, other reasons force people to move too. For example, environmental problems like natural disasters such as floods, earthquakes, or droughts, or the effect of climate change like rising temperature or sea levels force people to leave their homes to find safer places. Migration is one of the most important features of the 21st century. It means many people move to live in countries other than when they were born. These movements help countries grow and develop economically and socially. For example, migrants bring new skills, work in different jobs, and support communities in many ways. So global migration also helps achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, which are set of goals agreed upon by countries to make the world better by 2030. So migration is linked to many of these goals like reducing poverty, improving health, education, and promoting peace and fairness. Migrants also send money back to their families in home countries, helping those countries grow too. So now, let's go on to migration and sustainable development goals. The 2030 Agenda is the first international development plan to officially include migration as an important part of development. It recognizes that migration plays a big role in helping countries grow and develop. The agenda has specific goals and targets related to migration, like making migration safe, regular, and well-managed. It also understands that migrants can face special challenges and need protection. It also encourages cooperation among many groups to create better migrants policies that benefit everyone. Because the agenda is supported by many countries, it helps to ensure migration-related plans can get attention and resources. So overall, including the migration in the 2030 Agenda helps the world work together for safer, fairer, and more beneficial migration as a part of sustainable development. Migration affects many parts of development. The 2030 Agenda looks at migration in a broad way across different areas like the economy, society, environment, and culture. Migration also affects social aspects like how new people join communities and share cultures. It can bring new ideas and ways to adapt to challenges like climate change. So migration can also impact the environment because moving population can change the use of land and resources. So migration is very important to understand all these effects to help the countries plan better for the future and make sure migration benefits everyone. So thank you.
Bright day, everyone. I am JN Lakenya from BTL Ed IA 3A. Today, we will gonna be discussing the 17 Sustainable Development Goals or SDG. So, the Sustainable Development Goals are also known as the Global Goals are a universal call to adoption adopted by the United Nations in 2015. They aim to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity by 2030. So the number one is no poverty. No poverty everywhere and make sure everyone has the basic things they need to live, like food, shelter, education, and opportunities for a better life. Number two is the zero hunger. No one in the world should be hungry. Everyone should have enough safe and healthy food everywhere. Number three, good health and well being. Make sure everyone is healthy and can get proper medical care. This includes preventing diseases, reducing deaths, and improving overall health for all ages. Number four, quality education. Give everyone access to good and equal education, no matter who they are or where they live. It also aims to improve schools, teachers, and learning opportunities for all ages. And number five, gender equality. Men and women should have the same rights, opportunities, and respect. This includes stopping discrimination, violence, and giving equal access to education, work, and leadership. And number six, clean water and sanitation. Everyone should have access to safe drinking water and clean toilets. It also focuses on protecting water sources and making sure water is used responsibly. Number seven, affordable and clean energy. Provide reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for everyone. Promote renewable energy and energy efficiency. Number eight, decent work and economic growth. Promote jobs that are safe, fair, and pay well. Support economic growth that benefits everyone. Number nine, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Build resilient infrastructure and support innovation. Encourage industries that create jobs and sustainable development. And number 10, reduce inequalities. Reduce inequality within and among countries. Give equal opportunities for all people regardless of their background. Number 11, sustainable cities and communities. Make cities safe, resilient, and sustainable. Improve housing and transportation and public spaces for everyone. Number 12, responsible consumption and production. Use natural resources wisely and reduce waste. Encourage sustainable lifestyles and business practices. Number 13, climate action. Take urgent action to combat climate change, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and adapt to its impacts. Number 14, life below water. Protect ocean, seas, and marine lives. 15. Life on land. Protect forests, wildlife, and land ecosystems. Stop land degradation and promote sustainable use of natural resources. Number 16. Peace, justice, and strong institutions. Promote peace, justice, and accountable institutions. Ensure access to law, reduce violence, and fight corruption. And lastly, number 17, partnership for the goals. Strengthen global partnerships to achieve the SDGs, encourage cooperation among countries, organizations, and communities.
So next, migrants. So migrants are people who move from one place to another. So within their own country or to another country, usually to find work, safety, or better living conditions. So according to the International Organization for Migration, a migrant is any person who is moving or
has moved across an international border or within a state away from his/her habitual places of residence. So, a migrant, according to IOM, is anyone who moves from their usually home to another place, whether within their country or to another country. So, no matter their legal status, reason for moving, or how long they stay. So, it regardless of number one, the person's legal status. So, the person's legal status means whether the migrant is documented or undocumented. So, this is whether they have the legal uh, permission or papers to live, work, or stay in the place they move to. Like, for example, a Filipino work in Canada with a work visa. So, siya, documented migrant. And isa pa ka-example, a person crossing a border without permission. Siya ang undocumented migrant. So, number two, whether the movement is voluntary or involuntary. So, whether the movement is voluntary or involuntary means that a person is considered a migrant regardless of whether they choose to move or were forced to move. So, ang voluntary migrant, siya ang person nga move by choice, usually sa work, education, or better living conditions. Example, a student moved to another city to study. And ang involuntary or forced migration, siya ang person moves because they have no other option, often due to war, disasters, persecution, or unsafe condition. Example, families leaving their homes after a typhoon or conflict. So, being a migrant doesn't depend on whether the move was choice or force. And number three, what the causes for the movement are. So, what the causes for the movement are. So, this means a person is considered a migrant regardless of the reason they move. So, migrant can happen for many reasons, like siyang economic, looking for a job or better income. Sa educational naman is mag-study sa another city or country. Also sa social is joining family or community. Sa environmental, escaping disasters like mga typhoons or mga floods. And sa political conflicts related like fleeting wars or persecution or violence. So the reason doesn't change the fact that they are a migrant. And number four, what the length of the stay is. So what the length of the stay is. So this means someone is makonsider nga migrant no matter how long they stay in the new place. So it could be sa short term or ang few weeks or months lang, like sa seasonal workers. Also ang long terms like years or permanent ang relocations, like sa or in short, are people who move no matter why they move or how long they stay. So for this definition, there are two categories of migrants can be identified. So first, labor or economic. So labor or economic migrants and family reunification. So ang labor for economic migrants. So people who move to another place within their country or abroad. So mainly mag-work para maka-earn better income. So this often includes moving to support sa ilang family to improve living conditions. And number two, so ang forced migrants are those who are completed to migrate due to adverse circumstances beyond their control. So forced migrants are people who are compelled to leave their home due to circumstances beyond their control, such as a war, persecution, or violence. While sa asylum seeker is a person who seeks safe from persecution or harm in a country other than his or her own and awaits a decision on the for refuge status under the relevant and international or national instrument. So, in case negative decision, the person must leave the country and maybe permission to stay is provided on humanitarian ground. So, a refuge person who owning to well-founded fear of persecution for reason of race, religion, nationality, membership of the particular social group or political opinions. So is outside the country of his her nationality and is unable or owning to such fear is unwilling to avail himself or herself of the persecution of the country. So asylum seeker, those are people who seek safety in another country because they fear harm or persecution. So they wait for a decision on whether they will be granted or refuge status. So if the request is denied, they may have to leave, though some are allowed to stay for humanitarian reasons. While sa refugees naman is people who have a well-founded fear of persecution based on race, religion, nationality, membership in a social group, or political opinions. So they are outside their countries of nationality and cannot or are unwilling to seek protection from their home country due to their fear. That's all.
For the continuation of our topic, so I will be discussing driver's migration. So driver's migrations are the forces that make people move from one another place. So these forces explain why migration starts and why people continue moving. For the second slides, it means the driver's immigrations included economic, environmental, and demographic, social and political reasons. So people migrate because they want better jobs and better incomes and better educations. For themselves and their families. For the third slides, it means some people migrate because they lack of basic human rights like healthcare, food, educations. So others move because of discriminations, poverty, or because they are separated from their families. They may also move because of crises such as natural disasters and wars, or also the environmental changes. So in the first slides, it means these migration drivers work indifferently depending on skills, location, distance, or duration. So skills means if the movement is within a community, province, or another country, while the location is where people come from and where they go. And the distance is how far they travel, and duration is how long they stay. So, when governments understand this, they can protect migrants better and manage migration properly. On the fifth slide, it means one main driver is economic and demographic factors. So, people often migrate because they want more job opportunities or because they experience poverty or lack of food. So, these economic and demographic conditions strongly influence a person's decisions to migrate. Overall, people migrate for many different reasons, and understanding these drivers help us support and protect migrants better.
Environmental drivers. A great number of countries identified as climate vulnerable tend to experience high rates of immigration, so it is critical to consider environment and climate-related evidence when analyzing current migration patterns and estimating future flows. Wilkinson et al. 2016. Environmental factors, including those related to climate change and natural disaster, directly and indirectly impact the resilience and vulnerability of individuals, households, and communities, and may lead to migration. Climate change drivers migration depends heavily on its interaction with other factors, including the perception of risk by affected communities and varies among and within communities. Atlas of Environmental Migration 2016. Beyond climate change, localized environment factors also force migration. Natural disasters like earthquakes and floods displace communities, making areas unlivable. Those with fewer resources and less support are more likely to move. How a community perceives the risk of this disaster also heavily influences whether people choose to migrate. Human-made crises. Human-made crises are among the primary root causes of migration and have an important impact on population movements more generally. The lack of respect for international human rights and humanitarian law has compounded growing displacement of many as a consequence of their deteriorating living condition. Countries where there is a high perception of corruption tend to be net immigration countries, while countries where there are lower perception of corruption tend to be net immigration countries. While corruption does not necessarily cause migration, it is more accurately seen as a contributing factor. According to 2015. So, migration is a global issue that all countries face. It also seen as important for reaching the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals (SDGs) by 2023. Classifying migrants and understanding the drivers, the reason behind migration, are key because this forms the basis of why global migration happens.